The massive space station stretched across the void like a metallic city among the stars. Nexus Prime housed the Galactic Council, where representatives from dozens of alien species made decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. Captain John Martinez stood in the airlock of his ship Aurora, adjusting his dress uniform. One final time before the most important meeting in human history, the diplomatic vessel had traveled for 3 months to reach this moment, Earth's application. For full membership in the Galactic Council represented humanity's greatest hope for acceptance among the stars. After 50 years of limited contact and gradual integration into galactic society, humans believed they had finally proven themselves worthy of equal treatment. Dr. Lisa Cameron walked beside Martinez as they entered the station's main corridor. Her briefcase contained decades of research showcasing human achievements in medicine, agriculture, and terraforming. She had worked tirelessly to document every breakthrough, every innovation that demonstrated human potential. Behind them followed Admiral Peter Collins, his chest decorated with medals earned during the Outer Rim conflicts where human forces had fought. Alongside alien allies, the corridor buzzed with activity as various species moved about their business. Tall crystalline Zephyrians glided past on silent feet, their translucent bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. Reptilian Crathuri hissed conversations in their harsh language while their forked tongues tasted the recycled air. Ethereal Astrani floated above the walkways, their ghostly forms shimmering as they communicated through psychic whispers that tickled the edges of human consciousness. Martinez had studied each species extensively during the journey. The Zephyrians prided themselves on technological superiority, viewing themselves as the galaxy's intellectual elite. The Crathuri dominated through military might and rigid hierarchical structures that had remained unchanged for millennia. The Astrani considered themselves spiritually evolved, claiming their psychic abilities made them more advanced than any physical species. None of them paid much attention to the human delegation as they passed. A few glanced with mild curiosity, but most seemed to view humans as just another minor species seeking relevance in the vast galactic community. Martinez kept his expression neutral, but he noticed the subtle dismissal in their alien eyes. The council chambers occupied the station's central hub, a massive spherical room with viewing platforms arranged in ascending tiers. Each species had their designated area designed to accommodate their specific needs. The Zephyrian section featured crystalline resonance chambers, while the Crathuri platforms included heating elements to maintain their preferred temperature. The Astrani required no physical accommodation, simply floating in their designated airspace. Humans had been assigned a small platform near the bottom tier, barely large enough for the 3-person delegation. The positioning spoke volumes about their current status in the galactic hierarchy. Martinez took his place at the podium while Cameron and Collins flanked him. Their preparations complete, Ambassador Vextara of the Zephyrians called the session to order. The being's voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but the words carried an undertone of superiority that made Martinez's jaw tighten slightly. The formal proceedings began with the reading of Earth's application, delivered in the dry bureaucratic tone common to governments across the galaxy. When Martinez finally received permission to speak, he stepped forward with confidence born from years of diplomatic training. He spoke of humanity's contributions to galactic science, their role in maintaining trade routes through dangerous sectors, and their willingness to sacrifice for the common good. His words echoed through the chamber, but the alien faces remained. Largely impassive, Dr. Cameron followed with her presentation on human medical advances. She displayed holographic images of revolutionary treatments that had saved lives across multiple species. Her research on genetic compatibility had enabled successful organ transplants between humans and several alien races. The agricultural techniques developed on Earth had increased crop yields on 17 different worlds by an average of 40%. The Zephyrian ambassador interrupted her mid-sentence with a dismissive wave of one crystalline appendage. The being's voice took on a condescending tone as it questioned whether these minor contributions really warranted full membership status. Other species had made far greater advances in their respective fields, Vexthara pointed out with barely concealed contempt. Admiral Collins presented the military record next, detailing human participation in conflicts that had shaped the current galactic order. Human forces had served with distinction in the Outer Rim Wars, often taking on the most dangerous assignments. Their adaptability and creative tactical thinking had turned the tide in several crucial battles. Collins spoke with quiet pride of soldiers who had given their lives for causes greater than their own species' interests. A Crathary representative rose to respond, its scales catching the chamber's artificial lighting. The reptilian being acknowledged human military service but characterized it as merely adequate. Humans served well as foot soldiers, the Crathary admitted, but they lacked the strategic thinking and disciplined command structure necessary for true military leadership. The hissing accent made every word sound like an insult. An Astrani voice drifted through the chamber without any visible speaker, commenting on humanity's spiritual development. The psychic species found human minds chaotic and undisciplined, lacking the focus necessary for higher consciousness. While humans showed some potential for growth, they remained too emotionally driven to achieve true enlightenment. The ghostly voice suggested that perhaps in another few centuries, humanity might develop sufficient mental discipline to warrant consideration. The formal presentations concluded, and the council moved to deliberation. Martinez and his delegation waited in an adjacent chamber while the aliens discussed humanity's fate. Through the transparent walls, they could see animated discussions taking place in various alien languages. Crystalline forms flashed with rapid color changes, reptilian heads bobbed in aggressive gestures, and ethereal shapes pulsed with psychic energy. Dr. Cameron reviewed her notes anxiously, wondering if she had emphasized the wrong achievements. Admiral Collins stood at attention, his military bearing unchanged, despite the obvious dismissal of human capabilities. Martinez paced quietly, his diplomatic training warring with growing frustration at the casual contempt displayed toward his species. The deliberation lasted 3 hours before Ambassador Vexthara summoned them back to the main chamber. The crystalline being announced the council's decision with the same dispassionate tone used for routine administrative matters. Earth's application for full membership had been denied by unanimous vote. Humanity would be granted associate status, which provided limited trading privileges and the right to petition for assistance in emergencies. Associate status meant no voting rights, no representation in council decisions, and no protection under galactic law beyond basic humanitarian considerations. Humans would remain second-class citizens in their own galaxy, tolerated but not respected, useful but not valued. The chamber erupted in what passed for celebration among the assembled aliens. Zephyrian crystals chimed with harmonious frequencies, Crathary hissed approval, and Astrani emanated waves of satisfaction. They had maintained their exclusive club while throwing humanity a token gesture to prevent complete alienation, maintained his diplomatic composure as he accepted the decision gracefully. He thanked the council for their consideration and expressed humanity's commitment to proving themselves worthy of eventual full membership. His words were carefully chosen to avoid any hint of criticism or disappointment, though both emotions burned in his chest like molten metal. As the human delegation prepared to leave, casual conversations resumed among the alien representatives. Martinez overheard fragments of discussion that revealed their true attitudes toward humanity. One Zephyrian commented that humans were amusing in their earnestness, like children playing at being adults. A Crathary mentioned using human colonies as buffer zones against hostile species, treating human lives as acceptable losses in their strategic planning. The final insult came as they reached the exit. An Astrani voice whispered mockingly about human art and culture, dismissing their music as primitive noise and their literature as emotional drivel lacking intellectual depth. The psychic being suggested that humans might eventually evolve beyond their current limitations, but probably not for several thousand years. Danny Rodriguez, a human maintenance worker servicing the station's environmental systems, paused in his work as the delegation passed. He had been monitoring the council session through the station's internal communications network, his security clearance providing access to most non-classified transmissions. The young engineer's face reflected the same mixture of anger and disappointment that Martinez struggled to conceal. The journey back to their quarters passed in heavy silence. Three humans who had arrived with hope and determination now walked with the weight of galactic rejection on their shoulders. They had offered their best, presented their achievements with pride, and received condescension in return. 6 months had passed since the humiliation at Nexus Prime, but the memory burned fresh in every human heart across the galaxy. The Galactic Council's rejection had spread through human space like wildfire, carried by official reports and whispered conversations in cantinas on distant worlds. What surprised the aliens was not anger or protest from humanity, but something far more unsettling. Complete silence. Commander Amy Thompson stood in the control center of the hidden research facility on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The massive underground complex had been built decades earlier as Earth's primary deep space monitoring station, but now it served a very different purpose. Banks of quantum computers hummed quietly as they processed encrypted communications from human colonies scattered across 47 star systems. The facility's main display showed a three-dimensional map of known space, with red dots marking human settlements and blue lines indicating established trade routes. Green markers represented human military installations, while yellow symbols tracked the positions of diplomatic outposts and research stations. It was an impressive network built over half a century of gradual expansion into the galaxy. Amy had spent her entire career in the colonial administration, managing the complex logistics of human expansion. She understood better than most how deeply integrated humanity had become with galactic civilization. Human colonies produced food for alien worlds. Human engineers maintained critical infrastructure, and human soldiers served in peacekeeping forces throughout Council space. The irony was not lost on her that the same aliens who dismissed humans as primitive couldn't function without their contributions. Every major space station relied on human maintenance crews to keep life support systems running. Agricultural worlds across the galaxy depended on human-developed farming techniques that had revolutionized crop yields. Even alien military forces had grown accustomed to human tactical advisors who provided creative solutions to complex strategic problems. Dr. Kevin Park entered the control center carrying a sealed data container, marked with the highest security classifications. The xenobiologist had been traveling between human research facilities for weeks, quietly gathering every piece of scientific data, cultural artifact, and technological innovation that represented humanity's contributions to galactic civilization. His mission was part of something the aliens couldn't imagine: a complete withdrawal from their society. Kevin's container held copies of medical research that had saved millions of alien lives, agricultural data that had prevented famines on dozen worlds, and engineering specifications for systems that kept space stations operational across the galaxy. All of it was being quietly removed from alien databases and secured in human-controlled storage facilities. The plan had a name that reflected its simple elegance: Project Homeward. Amy had conceived it during the long journey back from Nexus Prime as she watched Captain Martinez struggle with the weight of galactic rejection. Instead of begging for acceptance or fighting for recognition, humanity would simply leave. Not in anger, not with threats or dramatic gestures, but with the quiet dignity that defined their species at its best. Captain Helen Foster coordinated the military aspects of the withdrawal from her flagship station near the Kepler 442 system. Her vessel appeared to be conducting routine patrol operations, but encrypted communications flowed constantly between her ship and human military units throughout Council space. Orders went out disguised as training schedules and equipment rotations, each message carefully crafted to avoid detection by alien monitoring systems. Helen had served alongside alien forces for 15 years, earning their respect through competence and reliability. The irony burned in her chest as she planned the withdrawal of the same forces that aliens had dismissed as mere foot soldiers. Without human tactical flexibility and creative problem-solving, many alien military operations would struggle to maintain effectiveness. The evacuation began with civilian populations on the outermost human colonies. Families packed their belongings into cargo containers while colonial administrators cited routine population redistributions and economic opportunities elsewhere. Transport ships arrived on schedule, loading colonists and their possessions before departing for undisclosed destinations deeper in human space. Engineer Carlos Mendez worked alone in the quantum communication relay station orbiting the Proxima Centauri system. The facility was one of dozens that humans had built and maintained throughout Council space, providing the instant communication network that held galactic civilization together. Carlos had designed many of these systems personally, his understanding of quantum entanglement principles surpassing even the most advanced alien scientists. His fingers moved across the control interface with practiced precision as he implemented carefully planned modifications to the relay network. The changes were subtle, buried deep in the system's operating code where alien technicians were unlikely to discover them. When activated, these modifications would sever human-built communication links throughout Council space, leaving the aliens to maintain systems they had never fully understood. Dr. Rachel Stone led a team of human medical researchers on the hospital station orbiting Kepler 438b for years. They had shared their knowledge freely with alien colleagues, developing treatments that bridged the gap between different species' biological systems. Now they were quietly deleting research files and removing critical data from shared databases. Rachel's team had revolutionized interspecies medicine, creating protocols that allowed successful organ transplants between humans and 17 different alien races. Their work on genetic compatibility had saved thousands of lives and advanced medical science by decades. The aliens had accepted these contributions as their natural due, never acknowledging the human ingenuity that made such breakthroughs possible. The medical team packed their research carefully, ensuring that life-saving treatments would remain available to humans while leaving alien medical science to function with pre-contact knowledge levels. It was not cruelty that motivated their actions, but simple withdrawal of cooperation that had never been properly valued. News of the protection mandate reached human space through official council channels, but its true implications were understood immediately by every human who heard it. The proposal would place all human worlds under direct alien oversight, ostensibly for their own safety and development. Alien administrators would govern human colonies. Alien military forces would provide security, and alien bureaucrats would manage human affairs. The condescending language of the proposal made clear that aliens viewed humans as children requiring guidance rather than partners deserving respect. References to human emotional instability and primitive social structures filled the document, painting a picture of a species too immature to govern itself effectively. Amy read the proposal in her command center on Titan, her expression remaining carefully neutral as rage built in her chest. The document represented everything wrong with humanity's relationship with the Galactic Council. Aliens who had benefited from human contributions for decades now sought to control the very people whose innovations kept their civilization functioning. The protection mandate became the catalyst that accelerated Project Homeward beyond all original timelines. What had been planned as a gradual withdrawal over several years now compressed into months as human communities throughout Council space received urgent evacuation orders. The exodus that had begun quietly now moved with purpose and determination. Transport fleets appeared at human colonies with mathematical precision, arriving exactly when needed to evacuate entire populations. The logistics involved required coordination that impressed even experienced military planners, but it proceeded with the efficiency that characterized human operations at their best. Families who had lived on alien worlds for generations packed lifetime accumulations into cargo containers and departed for destinations they had never seen. Manufacturing facilities that had produced goods for alien markets shut down production lines and dismantled critical equipment. Human-operated mines ceased extraction operations, their valuable materials left in the ground rather than enriching alien corporations. Research laboratories deleted experimental data and destroyed prototype technologies that alien scientists had hoped to acquire, the withdrawal extended beyond physical assets, to include knowledge and expertise that humans had freely shared for decades. Database administrators erased technical specifications from alien computer systems, ensuring that maintenance procedures for human-built infrastructure would disappear along with the engineers who had created them. Scientific journals lost decades of human research as authors, exercised their rights to retract published papers. Financial systems that had processed transactions across multiple star systems began experiencing subtle malfunctions as human programmers introduced carefully designed flaws into software they had originally written. Trade agreements were allowed to expire without renewal, while human merchant fleets redirected their routes away from alien markets. The aliens noticed the changes gradually, like a patient becoming aware of slowly developing symptoms. Equipment failures increased in frequency across council space as maintenance schedules fell behind. 3 years had passed since the first human families quietly loaded their belongings onto transport ships and disappeared into the void beyond council space. What had begun as scattered reports of human migration had evolved into a crisis that threatened the foundation of galactic civilization. The aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive servants now faced the collapse of systems they had taken for granted. On the agricultural world of Kepler 442b, Zephyrion Overseer Nexkala stood in the middle of failing crop fields that stretched to the horizon. The crystalline being's translucent form flickered with stress patterns as soil analysis reports displayed holographic data that made no sense. Crop yields had dropped by 60% over 2 growing seasons, and the decline was accelerating despite increased application of standard fertilizers. The human agricultural specialists who had revolutionized farming on this world were gone, along with their intuitive understanding of how different soil types interacted with various plant species. Nexkala possessed advanced theoretical knowledge of agriculture, but theory proved useless when faced with the practical challenges of managing millions of acres of diverse cropland. The Zephyrian had tried to replicate human farming methods by following written procedures, but the documentation assumed knowledge that humans had gained through generations of hands-on experience. References to reading soil conditions through visual inspection, adjusting planting schedules based on weather patterns, and modifying irrigation systems to match plant growth cycles meant nothing to a being who had never worked directly with growing things. Chief Engineer Gary Phillips had designed the agricultural management systems before his departure, creating automated networks that monitored soil chemistry, weather conditions, and plant health across the entire continental farming region. The system still functioned, generating detailed reports and recommendations, but interpreting their output required understanding that went beyond simple technical training. Nexkala had requested replacement agricultural experts from the Galactic Council, but no other species possessed comparable expertise in large-scale food production. The Krathari grew food in controlled environment facilities that bore no resemblance to open-field agriculture. The Astrani sustained themselves through energy absorption rather than consuming physical matter. Other species had never developed agricultural techniques. Beyond subsistence farming, similar crises emerged across council space as the absence of human expertise became impossible to ignore. The massive space station orbiting Vega Prime experienced cascading system failures when its environmental controls malfunctioned during routine maintenance. Astrani technicians had attempted repairs using psychic manipulation of the station's computer networks, but their ethereal abilities proved inadequate for diagnosing mechanical problems. The environmental system had been designed by human engineers, who understood how to balance air circulation, temperature control, and waste processing for a facility housing 12 different species with incompatible atmospheric requirements. Documentation existed for basic maintenance procedures, but complex repairs required troubleshooting, skills that could only be developed through years of practical experience. Station Commander Thalanakar, a proud Astrani who had previously dismissed human engineering as crude mechanical work, now faced the evacuation of 60,000 residents if life support systems could not be restored. The ethereal being's psychic abilities allowed communication across vast distances and manipulation of energy fields, but provided no insight into why air recycling units were producing contaminated atmosphere. The Crathery military faced equally embarrassing failures as tactical situations developed beyond their rigid command structures. General Kethmorin had built his reputation on disciplined execution of established battle plans, but his forces now struggled against insurgent groups that employed unconventional tactics, without human advisors to provide creative solutions and adaptive strategies. The reptilian military proved predictable and inflexible. The rebel forces on Kepler 452c had learned to exploit Crathery tactical doctrine by using mobility and deception rather than direct confrontation. Human military advisors had previously countered such tactics with unpredictable responses that kept enemies off balance, but Crathery commanders could only respond according to established protocols that insurgents had studied and neutralized. General Kethmorin reviewed after-action reports that detailed a series of humiliating defeats against opponents who possessed inferior equipment and training. The rebels had turned Crathery's strength against itself by provoking responses that followed predictable patterns, then exploiting the rigid command structure that prevented rapid tactical adaptation. Ambassador Vexthara called an emergency session of the Galactic Council to address what official reports euphemistically termed infrastructure maintenance challenges. The crystalline being's voice carried harmonics of stress as delegates from member species reported similar problems across their territories. Systems that had operated flawlessly for decades were failing with increasing frequency and replacement. Expertise appeared to be unavailable. The formal session proceeded with diplomatic language that avoided acknowledging the scope of the crisis, but private conversations revealed the desperation growing among council members. Zephyrian industrial facilities could not maintain production schedules without human logistics coordinators. Astrani research stations experienced equipment failures that their advanced psychic abilities could not diagnose or repair. Crathery military installations struggled with maintenance procedures that required mechanical aptitude rather than disciplined following of orders. Secretary Janet Walsh attended the council session as humanity's remaining diplomatic representative, her presence a reminder of the species that member governments had dismissed as intellectually inferior. The human diplomat maintained perfect professional courtesy while providing no information about where her people had gone or when they might return. When directly questioned about humanity's mass departure from council space, Janet explained with diplomatic precision that humans were pursuing developmental opportunities that better aligned with their species' long-term goals. She expressed regret that timing had proven inconvenient for some ongoing projects, but emphasized humanity's right to self-determination in choosing their path forward. The response infuriated alien delegates who had grown accustomed to treating humans as a resource to be managed rather than partners to be respected. Vexthara demanded specific timelines for human return to their previous roles, while Crathery representatives suggested military action to compel human cooperation. The Astrani proposed psychic intervention to locate hidden human settlements. Janet's response remained unchanged regardless of threats or inducements offered. Humanity appreciated the Council's interest in their welfare, but had made collective decisions about their future that did not require external approval. The diplomatic language was flawless, but the message was unmistakable. Humans would not be returning to serve as the galaxy's maintenance crew. Dr. Marcus Webb worked alone in his laboratory on the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, one of the last humans remaining in Council space. His mission was to complete final data transfers before the station's scheduled abandonment, ensuring that critical research would not be lost during humanity's withdrawal. The quantum physicist had spent his career developing technologies that pushed the boundaries of known science. Marcus had discovered methods for manipulating quantum fields that enabled faster-than-light communication without traditional relay networks. His research had revolutionary implications for galactic civilization, potentially eliminating communication delays that currently limited coordination across vast distances. The work was nearing completion, but final testing required equipment that existed only in council-controlled facilities. The irony was not lost on Marcus that aliens who had dismissed human intellectual capabilities were about to lose access to discoveries that would have advanced their civilization by centuries. His research notes were encrypted and scheduled for deletion once data transfer was complete, ensuring that the breakthrough would benefit only those who had supported its development. Similar scenes played out across council space as the last human specialists completed their final tasks before departure. Medical researchers deleted experimental treatments from alien databases, ensuring that breakthrough therapies would remain exclusive to human colonies. Industrial engineers removed optimization algorithms from manufacturing systems, causing production efficiency to decline toward pre-contact levels. The economic impact of human withdrawal became impossible to ignore as trade networks optimized by human logistics coordinators devolved into inefficient shipping routes that increased costs and delivery times. Financial systems experienced processing delays as human programmers' elegant code was replaced by alien alternatives that lacked the same efficiency and reliability. Transport. Captain Linda Foster commanded one of the final evacuation fleets as it prepared to depart council space with the last human civilians from the Kepler 438 system. Her ships carried families who had lived on alien worlds for generations. 5 years had passed since the first human transport disappeared beyond the edge of council space, and the galaxy bore scars that deepened with each passing month. What had once been a thriving interstellar civilization now struggled with cascading failures that threatened the foundation of organized society. The Galactic Council chambers, once filled with the confident voices of superior species, now echoed with desperate discussions about survival. President Victoria Hayes stood at the observation deck of New Geneva, a capital city of humanity's new homeworld on Kepler 438b. The sprawling metropolis below blended seamlessly with the alien landscape, its architecture flowing like water around natural formations rather than imposing geometric structures upon the environment. Human cities had always adapted to their surroundings rather than dominating them, a philosophy that extended beyond urban planning to encompass their entire approach to existence. The quantum broadcast array beside Victoria hummed with power as technicians prepared for a transmission that would reach every inhabited system in the galaxy. For 5 years, humanity had maintained complete silence about their new civilization, allowing speculation and rumor to fill the void left by their departure. Today would mark the first time humans spoke directly to the galaxy since their exodus. Began. Dr. William Carter monitored the transmission equipment with the same attention to detail that had made human engineering legendary throughout council space. The broadcast system represented advances in quantum communication that surpassed anything previously achieved, capable of reaching every star system simultaneously without relay networks or time delays. The technology demonstrated just how far human science had progressed during their years of isolation. Meanwhile, reconnaissance ships commanded by Captain Frank Morrison returned from their latest survey of council space with reports that confirmed humanity's most pessimistic projections. The galactic civilization that had rejected them was collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. Unable to maintain systems it had never bothered to understand, Frank's recordings showed space stations operating with skeleton crews as life. Support systems failed faster than alien technicians could repair them. Agricultural worlds lay fallow because no species possessed the knowledge to maintain large-scale food production without human expertise. Trade routes that had connected thousands of worlds for centuries now carried a fraction of their former traffic as logistics networks optimized by human coordinators devolved into chaos. The military situation was even worse, with council forces suffering defeats against minor insurgent groups who exploited tactical inflexibility that human advisors had previously countered. The Krathari Empire had lost control of 17 star systems to rebels who used mobility and deception rather than direct confrontation. Astrani peacekeeping forces proved incapable of maintaining order without human support personnel who had handled practical logistics while ethereal beings focused on psychic manipulation. Captain Morrison's most disturbing discovery involved Alien attempts to locate human settlements through espionage and infiltration. Zephyrian shapeshifters had attempted to penetrate human space by mimicking human appearance, but advanced biometric scanners developed by Dr. Susan Wright detected them immediately. The crystalline beings possessed perfect visual mimicry but could not replicate the subtle biological markers that identified genuine humans. The infiltration attempts revealed the desperation growing within Council space as alien governments sought any means to regain access to human knowledge and expertise. Some species had attempted to reverse engineer human technology from abandoned installations, but their efforts produced inferior copies that lacked the elegant efficiency of original designs. Dr. Wright's detection systems represented another example of human innovation during their period of isolation. Rather than stagnating without alien contact, human science had accelerated beyond anything achieved during their integration with galactic society. Free from council regulations that restricted certain research areas, human scientists had made breakthroughs that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The Krathari had attempted a more direct approach, sending a battle fleet to reclaim human territories through military force. Admiral Charles Grant commanded the defense forces that responded to this invasion with tactics that perfectly exemplified human strategic thinking. Rather than engaging in direct combat, Grant's ships used advanced stealth technology to render the alien vessels invisible to each other's sensors. The Krathari fleet found itself unable to coordinate attacks or maintain formation as individual ships lost contact with their command structure. Sophisticated electronic warfare systems convinced each vessel that it was alone in space, surrounded by enemies that existed only in their sensor readings. The psychological pressure of isolation caused the invasion force to retreat without a single shot being fired by human defenders. Grant's victory demonstrated human military evolution during their years away from Council space. No longer constrained by alien tactical doctrine or required to coordinate with inflexible command structures, human forces had developed strategies that emphasized creativity and adaptation over brute force application. The technological advances extended beyond military applications to encompass every aspect of human civilization. Clean fusion reactors provided unlimited energy without the environmental contamination that plagued alien power systems. Transportation networks used gravity manipulation rather than conventional propulsion, allowing rapid movement across planetary surfaces without infrastructure damage. Agricultural systems on human worlds produced yields that exceeded anything achieved during their time in Council space, using biotechnology that worked with natural ecosystems rather than replacing them. Medical facilities could treat conditions that alien doctors considered incurable, employing techniques that integrated biological processes with quantum-level manipulation. Cultural achievements paralleled technological progress as human artists explored new forms of expression freed from alien aesthetic constraints. Music that incorporated quantum harmonics created soundscapes impossible with traditional instruments, while visual arts used programmable matter to create sculptures that existed in constant flux between multiple dimensional states. President Hayes reviewed intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of galactic civilization's decline. Economic systems that had functioned smoothly for centuries now experienced regular crashes as trading networks collapsed under their own complexity. Political alliances dissolved as member species blamed each other for problems that stemmed from humanity's absence rather than alien incompetence. The Zephyrian Empire had lost its position as the galaxy's technological leader when their research facilities could no longer maintain equipment designed by human engineers. Crystal-based computing systems that had seemed so advanced now appeared primitive compared to quantum processors that humans had developed using principles that crystalline beings could not comprehend. Astroni's spiritual authority diminished as their psychic abilities proved inadequate for solving practical problems that required physical intervention. Ethereal beings who had claimed superiority through mental evolution found themselves helpless when faced with mechanical failures or logistical challenges that could not be resolved through meditation. The Krathari military hierarchy crumbled as traditional command structures proved unable to adapt to enemies who refused to fight according to established protocols. Reptilian generals who had built careers on disciplined execution of standard tactics now faced opponents who changed their approach faster than rigid military doctrine could counter. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, formerly Secretary Janet Walsh from the Diplomatic Corps, now served as Humanities Director of External Affairs from their new capital. Her department monitored alien communications and assessed threats to human security, but their primary function involved documenting the collapse of the civilization that had rejected them. Jennifer's reports detailed the desperate measures that alien governments were implementing to maintain basic services as infrastructure continued to deteriorate. The Galactic Council had issued emergency decrees requiring member species to share technology and expertise, but no amount of cooperation could replace the intuitive understanding that humans had brought to complex systems. Some alien scientists had attempted to recreate human innovations by studying abandoned research facilities, but their efforts revealed fundamental differences in how species approached problem-solving. Where humans saw interconnected systems that required holistic solutions, aliens focused on individual components that could be optimized separately. The holistic approach had allowed humans to create technologies that were greater than the sum of their parts, achieving efficiency and reliability that exceeded theoretical maximums. Alien attempts to replicate these systems produced functional but inferior versions that lacked the elegant integration that characterized human engineering. President Hayes prepared for her historic broadcast with awareness that this moment would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. The species that had been dismissed as primitive servants now possessed technology and capabilities that surpassed their former masters. 10 years had passed since Captain John Martinez stood before the Galactic Council seeking acceptance for his species, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the thriving civilization that had once dismissed humanity as primitive servants. The great space stations that had symbolized alien technological superiority now drifted as darkened hulks. Their life support systems failed beyond repair. Trade routes that had connected thousands of worlds lay abandoned as the complex logistics networks that sustained interstellar commerce collapsed under their own weight. Ambassador Vexthura stood in the ruins of what had once been the Council's greatest achievement, the Nexus Prime station that now housed fewer than 10,000 residents instead of its former population of 2 million. The crystalline being's translucent form flickered with patterns of distress as emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through corridors that had once bustled with representatives from dozens of species. The Zephyrian Empire, that had prided itself on technological advancement, could no longer maintain the basic infrastructure necessary for modern civilization. Power grids failed regularly as alien technicians struggled with fusion reactors designed by human engineers who had understood principles that crystalline beings could only theorize about. Communication networks that had once spanned the galaxy now functioned sporadically, leaving entire star systems isolated for months at a time. Vexthara had spent the last 5 years traveling between the remaining Council worlds, witnessing firsthand the collapse of everything the Alliance had built over centuries of cooperation. Agricultural worlds that had fed billions now struggled to sustain their own populations as crop yields declined without human farming expertise. Industrial centers that had produced goods for thousands of species had shut down production lines when maintenance became impossible without human engineers. The ambassador's mission was desperate but necessary to reach the borders of human space and request assistance from the species the Council had so thoroughly dismissed. Intelligence reports suggested that humanity had not just survived their exodus, but had built something remarkable beyond the edge of known space. Rumors spoke of technologies that surpassed anything previously imagined and cities that existed in harmony with alien environments. The journey to human space required traveling through regions that had once been considered safe, but now teemed with pirates and raiders who preyed on the weak. Council military forces could no longer maintain order across their former territory as Krathari discipline proved inadequate against enemies who refused to follow. established rules of engagement. The rigid command structures that had once dominated through superior firepower now crumbled when faced with opponents who adapted faster than traditional tactics could counter. Aurora Point Station appeared on Vexthora S sensors like a beacon of hope in the darkness of failed civilization. The facility orbited a neutron star at the edge of human space, its elegant design flowing organically around the gravitational anomalies created by the stellar remnant. The station's architecture represented everything alien engineers had never understood about human construction philosophy. Working with natural forces rather than attempting to dominate them, President Victoria Hayes walked slowly through the gardens of New Geneva, her age showing in the careful deliberation of each step, but her mind remaining as sharp as the day she had first addressed the galaxy. At 93 years old, she had guided humanity through its greatest transformation, from rejected supplicants to masters of their own destiny. The flowering trees around her had been genetically modified to thrive in the planet's unique atmospheric conditions, their blossoms creating a rainbow of colors that had never existed in nature. The intelligence briefing on her desk painted a picture of galactic civilization's near-complete collapse. Entire species faced extinction as their worlds became uninhabitable without human environmental expertise. The Astrani had lost most of their population to energy starvation when their meditation techniques proved inadequate for maintaining the complex systems necessary for survival on artificial habitats. Commander Tony Rodriguez, now serving as Victoria's senior military advisor, presented detailed analyses of alien fleet movements that suggested coordinated attempts to reach human space. The aging officer had spent decades studying alien tactical doctrine and could recognize the desperation behind recent council actions. Their approach patterns indicated not invasion but supplication, the movements of beings who had exhausted all other options. The delegation that arrived at Aurora Point represented what remained of galactic civilization's leadership. Vexthara led the group, but the crystalline being was accompanied by representatives from every major species that had once dominated council proceedings. Crathery General Keth Moran stood beside Astrani High Mystic Velfanner, former enemies. United by shared desperation, President Hayes met them in Aurora Point's central diplomatic chamber, a space designed specifically for interactions between humans and alien species. The room's atmosphere and gravity could be adjusted for each species' comfort, while translation systems ensured perfect communication despite linguistic barriers. Every detail reflected human attention to making others feel welcome, a courtesy that had never been reciprocated during humanity's time in Council space. The alien delegation presented their case with the humility of beings who had learned too late the value of what they had lost. Vexthara spoke for the group, acknowledging the Council's past mistakes and offering everything within their power to secure human assistance. Full membership with voting rights, territorial concessions that would grant humans control over entire star systems, exclusive trading agreements that would make humanity wealthy beyond measure. The Crathery General offered military alliances that would place alien fleets under human command, while the Astrani mystic promised to share psychic technologies that had been closely guarded secrets for millennia. Every species represented in the delegation was prepared to surrender advantages they had spent centuries accumulating, all for the chance to regain access to human expertise. Victoria listened to their proposals with the patience that came from decades of diplomatic experience. She understood the weight of billions of lives that hung in the balance, the moral responsibility that came with possessing the power to save civilizations that had rejected her people. The president had spent years preparing for this moment, knowing that it would eventually come as alien arrogance gave way to alien desperation. Commander Rodriguez presented intelligence assessments that confirmed the delegates' claims about galactic conditions. Multiple species faced extinction within decades if current trends continued, their populations declining as infrastructure failures made entire worlds uninhabitable. The collapse had reached a tipping point where intervention might be the only option that prevented genocide on an unprecedented scale. The moral complexity of the situation weighed heavily on Victoria's shoulders as she considered humanity's response. The species that had dismissed them as primitive servants now begged for salvation from the very people they had refused to accept as equals. Helping them would save lives, but might also perpetuate the cycle of dependency that had characterized human-alien relations for decades. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, now serving as Director of Humanitarian Affairs, provided detailed projections of what assistance would require. Stabilizing galactic civilization would demand massive commitments of human resources and expertise, essentially recreating the support networks that had existed before the Exodus. The question was whether such assistance could be provided without returning to the subordinate relationship that had driven humanity away. President Hayes rose from her chair with the dignity that had defined her presidency and addressed the assembled delegates with words that would reshape galactic history. The Terran Federation would provide humanitarian aid to prevent civilian casualties and ecological disasters, she announced. But humanity would not return to Council space as members or subjects of alien authority. The President explained that humanity had learned valuable lessons during their time among the stars. That respect could not be demanded or legislated but must be earned and freely given. That acceptance imposed from outside was worthless compared to confidence built from within, and that the galaxy's judgment of human worth mattered far less than humanity's judgment of itself. The aid packages that humanity provided were generous, but came with clear boundaries. Human medical teams would treat alien populations suffering from infrastructure collapse, but they would work from human-controlled facilities rather than integrating with alien medical systems. Human engineers would repair critical systems to prevent humanitarian disasters, but they would not resume permanent maintenance roles that created dependency. The final scene of humanity's great drama played out in the observation lounges of Aurora Point as alien delegates departed with humanitarian supplies but no political agreements. Vexthara's crystalline form flickered with patterns that might have been gratitude, or might have been frustration as the being contemplated a future where humanity existed as equals rather than servants.